Greg is asking, all those put debit spreads were paid for by previous naked put sales. That is correct, right? If I don't continue to add put debit spreads to this specific trade, right? Once the April, once April 11th naked puts roll off, let's say I don't close them, or maybe I close them for a small fraction of what I sold them for, right? This will leave me with just put debit spreads, right? And these put debit spreads were paid for from the previous several tranches of the naked puts that have already came and went. Right. So essentially, I mean, you could think of it. You could think of it like this: you sell naked puts. You take some of that credit that you're bringing in to finance your longer term put debit spreads. Right. You didn't spend all the money. Maybe you split it 50-50. Right. So if you collected $2,000 on your naked puts, maybe you spent $1,000 to buy the put debit spread, right? Or a third, or whatever, it depends how much you want to spend, how far out of the money you want, or how wide you want those put debit spreads to be, right? It's very discretionary. And then when the first round of the naked puts come off, right? Now you're kind of at a break even. What you're left with is a fully paid for put debit spread. So you essentially, did you generate income? You kind of did, but you didn't because you used that to pay for. So you only made half the income. The other half went to pay for the put debit spread. Okay, no big deal. You sell another round of naked puts. And again, you spent maybe a third, maybe 40%, maybe 50% of overall, right? What you're collecting on the next round of the naked puts. You add another round of put debit spreads. So now you're left with one round of naked puts and two put debit spreads. And when that second round of the naked puts rolls off, now you're left with two leftover put debit spreads or two layers of put debit spreads, and they're all already paid for, right? So you're using naked puts to generate income, but and also at the same time, you're financing those put debit spreads, right? And over time, you will end up with, three, four, five, however many layers of put debit spreads. They will all be paid for. And if at any given time you need to make adjustments to your naked puts, you will reach for those put debit spreads to cover any cost or any expense that you have with rolling your naked puts. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. It is a calendarized 1-1-2, right? Because the 1-1 is far out in time. Let's say it has 180 days. And the 2, which is the naked puts, the 2 could be, 40 days, 50 days, 60 days, 30 days, whatever you like. Right? We're not talking about the specifics of where to place your put debit spreads or where to place your naked puts and vice versa. We're just talking about general idea of how, right, the mechanics of this trade. It is a calendarized 1-1-2. It could be a 1-1-1. It could be a 1-1, whatever, however, whatever the ratio that you want to use. But yes, the idea is longer term put debit spreads are going to be there, right? It's like a wall of put debit spreads that you're holding on to. And you're only going to use that if and when you need to make adjustments for your naked puts, which is the income part of the business. If you have, let's say, 4 put debit spreads, how many naked puts would be the max you'll have on? So if I have 4 put debit spreads, I would probably, so if I just continue to do a round of naked puts and add a put debit spread, in that case, with 4 put debit spreads, I will still have 2 naked puts. I just have, right? I'm not I'm not trying to leverage those put debit spreads and increase the number of the naked puts because those, I have multiple layers of put debit spreads. It's the other way around. The more put debit spreads you have, the better or the stronger your position with regards to hedging your naked puts. Let me repeat that. The more layers of put debit spreads you have, the better hedging you have for those two naked puts. I'm always going to have two naked puts against multiple layers of put debit spreads. So as I increase the number of put debit spreads, I don't necessarily look to increase the number of naked puts because I have more layers of put debit spreads. Having more put debit spreads just gives me a lot more options when I need to sell something or figure out how to generate a credit to pay for the adjustments of the naked puts. Bob, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, then no problem. Just reply and I'll try it from a different angle. But Jeff is saying, so when rolling puts up and out for a credit, we would like to make enough credit to finance another put debit spread. Yeah, that's generally the idea, right? Because let's look at it like this. And this is, hopefully, it's going to make sense. So what I did today, right? I closed out the original, right? So I had two put debit spreads in this trade and one layer of naked puts, right? So it was essentially this is a 2-2-2, right? Because I had one put debit spread, one more put debit spread, which makes it a 2-2, and then two as the naked puts. So this was a 1-1-1, two contracts each. Kind of. I hope this makes sense, right? So what I did was I bought to close the March 7th, right? March 7th. I closed this March 7th, and then I opened April 11th, and then I added another put debit spread. It's exact same thing as if, what if I just, let's leave this naked put alone for a second, the one that we closed today. Why don't we just go straight to to April 11th, which is 56 DTE. And the strike there was 5,600 minus 2. And then I went to August 15. And then I did, what was it, 200. $5,200, and the long leg was 4,800. Right, so this was, if I didn't buy to close if I didn't buy to close the March 7th, what I did today, I was essentially just adding, oops, I think I made a mistake. This is a -1. Right, what I would be doing, essentially, I would be just adding another 1-1-2 calendarized trade. Right, and this is what it would look like. Right? So essentially what I'm doing here, I'm adding another 1-1-2, and this one is going for, let's call this $22 credit. It's about 1,100 bucks. But what I did, I used some of that credit that we just saw from this trade, right? From this $22 credit. I used some of that credit to buy back, right? So I replaced this naked put, right? So as you can see, my credit went from 22 to about 14 because I bought the March 7th puts. So combined, this is what the new trade looks like. This is the 112 that I added today with the closed March 7th. And instead of two rounds of the put debit spreads, now there are three put debit spreads and only one round of the naked puts. Right. So essentially what I'm doing when I'm making these kind of adjustments, right? I'm entering a new 112. And yes, I am using some of that credit that I'm collecting on that 112 to get rid of some of the already old, mature, and decayed naked puts. So this essentially turns the original 222 into a 332. Does that make sense? And then at some point, yes, um, my closest in time, let me get rid of that. So this is what this position now looks like, right? This is a 332. This is where we ended up today. And then the naked puts have 56 days. And if we go and we assume that these naked puts will roll off, right? This will leave just three tranches of the put debit spreads, which have 75 days. But let's remember also that the naked puts that I sold today, they have 56 days. So if I hold them for 56 days and let them roll off, right, naturally, the nearest in time put debit spread isn't going to have 75 days, right? Because we have to go from today 56 days into the future. So 75 minus 56. By the time the April 11th puts roll off, the April 30th put debit spread is only going to have 19 days. Right? So, and that's when this campaign we kind of will close circle. Right? So I will end up with, and then let's say 56 days from now, right? If I don't close out the 5600 puts in April 11th early, if I don't close these early, let's say I wait for them to expire and then I sell another 112, which will now create a 442. The nearest expiring put debit spread is only going to have 19 days and they're going to start to roll off. So essentially I will, perpetually end up in a 332. That's going to go from 332 to about 442 for a little bit. And then the nearest put debit spread in time is going to roll off. That's going to put me back into a 332 and so on and so forth. No, Bob, that's a good question. Do I close out the put debit spread at some point? I don't see any reason to close out put debit spreads. I get it. We don't want to let any money go to waste. But in my opinion, right, I don't really see a reason to close it out just because we really never know. Let's say if I decide to close out a put debit spread that has like 19 days, right? And I say, well, I can sell this put debit spread that has 19 days. It's only worth, maybe 30 bucks. I don't want to throw it away, so let me collect that $30. And if between that 19 days and expiration, let's say market does something stupid, right? And that debit spread goes from $30 and now it's worth maybe $500, right? I could have used that $500 to save one of the tranches of the naked puts somewhere else, right? So I'm kind of leaving that $30 on the table to die. And that's my kind of insurance policy, right? That between or that over the next 19 days, everything is going to be all right. Because if everything isn't going to be all right, and if the market does go down maybe, 7 or 10%, and all of a sudden that put debit spread with only 19 days to go wakes up, I could use that to bring in a credit that I need to pay for any debits that I have to pay to take care of my naked puts elsewhere. It doesn't have to be in this specific trade, right? Especially if you're running multiple tranches of these 1x trades or these hedged income trades. Yeah, exactly, Bob. We really never know, what's going to happen. Again, I don't want to cash in on if I'm completely getting out of a, let's say if I have a tranche going on right now, right? Like for example, this trade right here. If I'm saying, you know what, I'm going to close this out. I don't want to do anything else with it. I wouldn't just buy back the naked puts and leave those put debit spreads to die. I have no reason to have these put debit spreads if I have nothing else going on. But if there's something that I have that may be able to benefit from these put debit spreads at some point in the future, in case the market goes down and I need to generate a credit, then I will leave them on. If I'm just closing down this trade and I have nothing else going on where I can use these put debit spreads, yes, I'm gonna sell these put debit spreads for sure. But as long as I have something out there that may need this put debit spread at some point in time to improve my positions or to take care of naked puts on the roll down and out, then I'm going to keep them on. And I hope that all of my put debit spreads expire worthless. Because what that means, if my put debit spreads are expiring worthless, that means I don't have to reach for that hedging insurance premium to fix my income part of the trade. Right. So I'm willing to reduce my potential income with the naked puts because I am spending some of this premium on those layers of put debit spreads. But if my short term income part of the business gets into trouble, the way I'm going to save this part of the business is by sacrificing some of that hedging part of the business. I know this could, sound like a very complicated process. It really isn't, right? The only way to make it simple is to really, I think, you will benefit tremendously by going through these 1-1x calendarized 1-1-2s, whatever you may call them. I know that, as these trades evolved, we also sometimes change the way we refer to these trades. I was calling these 1-1x bear traps. I don't love the bear trap in the name because sometimes it gives people this false sense of, oh, there's a trap. I'm going to hold and wait for the trap. But there is no trap. If you're catching the trap, guess what? Your income part of the business is on fire. Odds are if you don't take care of it, your margin potentially is going to balloon and you're not going to get the trap because you're going to get squeezed out of that trade. So I don't like the bear trap as much, even though, the structure of the trade hasn't really changed much. This is the exact same 1-1-2 that we were always doing, except we have moved the put debit spread, right, from the same expiration cycle where the naked puts are, gave it more time because when I needed the put debit spreads to really help me and hedge my income positions. Number one, the original put debit spreads weren't wide enough. They were only 50 points wide. And my leftover put debit spreads, like I would never had any positions where I had multiple layers of leftover put debit spreads. All my positions were they were they were left over with one put debit spread that only had maybe 3 weeks until expiration and was only 50 points wide. So clearly that wasn't enough. We needed to figure out how to make it so that we can build multiple layers of these put debit spreads. And again, these put debit spreads are not the answer to all of our problems, but having multiple tranches of these put debit spreads, having them be, 200, 250, 3, 400, 500 wide is definitely a little bit better, even though they are farther out of the money. So now, since they're farther out of the money, we're probably not going to sit and try to catch the price inside the trap. The only job for these put debit spreads is to provide the credit that we may need if we're forced to defend our income or the naked puts.